Have you ever really stopped to think about the hidden cost of your vacation? I mean, we spend ages planning the perfect trip, right? The flights, the hotels, all that incredible food, but we almost never think about what it costs the planet. Well, today, we're going to change that. We're going to peel back the layers on the environmental footprint of travel and check out a brand new way to actually measure it.
Okay, let's just jump right in with one single powerful number, 8%. A study in Nature Climate Change found that tourism, and we're talking about the whole shebang, flights, hotels, food, souvenirs, is responsible for a massive 8% of global carbon emissions. That is a huge slice of the pie.
So we know the impact is real, but here's the catch. It's invisible. It's easy to see how much money we're spending, right? But how do you track carbon? How do you actually compare the environmental hit of a week at the beach versus, say, a weekend exploring a new city? That's the exact challenge we're going to dig into.
So to really get the solution, we first have to get a handle on the problem. It's all about seeing how all these little tiny pieces come together to create this massive hidden footprint.
Just think about it for a second. Your carbon footprint isn't just a plane ride. Nope, it's the diesel that the tour bus burns. It's the electricity that's humming away to power the AC in your hotel. It's the gas used to cook your dinner. It's even the emissions from the trash you leave behind. Every single piece of the puzzle adds up.
So how on earth do you even begin to track all of that? Well, it turns out one government agency is creating a way to make this invisible footprint totally visible by creating a kind of standardized rulebook for the entire travel industry.
And here it is. This is the Travel Agency Tour Carbon Footprint Calculation Guidelines. It was put together by Taiwan's Tourism Administration, and it's basically a super comprehensive manual designed to help tour companies systematically figure out the emissions for any tour they offer.
And the whole point of it is crystal clear. This isn't about shaming anybody or pointing fingers. It's about empowerment. It's about giving these companies the tools they need to actually understand their impact, pinpoint where the biggest emissions are coming from, and then start making real, smart changes based on data.
So, what exactly is it we're measuring here? Well, a carbon footprint is just the grand total of all the greenhouse gases that get pumped out during some activity. By converting everything into one unit, this CO2 equivalent, we can actually compare totally different things. You can think of it like a nutritional label for your trip, but instead of showing calories, it shows the climate cost.
Now, to get this number right, the guide says you have to look at the entire story of a trip, from the very beginning to the very end. The method for this is called a life cycle assessment, and it breaks the whole thing down into 3 main stages.
And these are the 3 big ones. First, you've got raw material acquisition. That's all the stuff needed to even make the trip possible. Second is the service stage. That's the trip itself, the part you experience. And third, waste disposal. What happens to everything after it's been used up.
Okay, this flowchart might look a little intense at first, but it lays out the whole picture perfectly. See over on the left in that raw materials column? Those are all the inputs for the trip, things like food and hotel supplies. That all flows into the middle, the service stage, which is the actual tour. Then, over on the right, you see the outputs, the waste disposal part, like wastewater and trash. Every single thing on this chart has a carbon cost that has to be counted.
So let's zoom in on that raw material stage. This is stuff you might not even think about. We're talking about the paper your tickets are printed on, the individual ingredients that go into your meals, those little soaps and shampoos in the hotel. And get this, even the emissions from producing the fuel before it even gets anywhere near the bus's gas tank.
All right, next up is the service stage. Now, this is the part of the trip we actually see and do. It's the diesel being burned by the tour bus, the electricity keeping the hotel lights on, the gas that's cooking your food, and the water you use to shower. These are the direct emissions that are happening while you're actually on vacation.
And finally, and this is a big one, the trip isn't over just because you've gone home. The waste disposal stage has to account for everything that gets left behind. The wastewater from your hotel, it has to be treated. The garbage and the food you didn't eat, it all has to be collected and dealt with. And all of those processes release greenhouse gases, which are absolutely part of the trip's total footprint.
So, we've got all the pieces of the puzzle laid out. Now let's get into the math and see how this all clicks together to give us that one single, really revealing number.
Now this formula might look a little technical, but the idea behind it is actually super simple. You just take your activity data, which is really just how much of something you used, like liters of fuel or kilos of food. Then you multiply that by an emission factor, which is basically how much carbon it costs to make or use that one thing. That's it.
And here's where it gets really, really interesting. Check out this quick example from the guide.
So using 3 liters of diesel for the bus creates almost 10 kilograms of CO2 equivalent. Okay, but look at the pork meal. Just a half-kilo serving creates over 18 kilograms of CO2e. That's nearly double the impact of the fuel, mostly because of emissions from farming. Crazy, right? Even just a little bit of electricity adds another kilogram or so. You do this for every single thing on the trip to get your total.
And once you add up everything, and I mean everything from the paper brochure all the way to the wastewater treatment, the grand total for the example trip in the guide comes out to 39 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per person. For the very first time, that invisible cost now has a number.
Just knowing this number is incredibly powerful. It's not just about accounting, it's about fundamentally changing how we think about travel. This is all about building a more sustainable future.
And you might be wondering, okay, but who's checking the math? Great question. To make sure these numbers are totally trustworthy, they aren't just self-reported. As you can see from this diagram, the whole calculation goes through this intense 7-step verification process by an independent third party. They do everything from checking the documents to on-site audits, all to make sure the final data is accurate and reliable.
This is where the rubber really meets the road. This data leads to actual change. With this info, a tour company can easily see its carbon hotspots. You know, maybe it's a super long bus ride or a particular meal that has a huge impact. Then, they can actually redesign their trips. Maybe they swap the bus for a train or offer more awesome plant-based meals to create greener options for all of us.
And for us, as travelers, this is a total game changer. Right now, we mostly pick our trips based on 2 things, price and what we're going to see. But just imagine if you could also see the carbon footprint right there next to the price tag. Suddenly, you'd be able to make a choice that lines up not just with your wallet, but with your values too.
So it really all comes down to one big question for us to think about. If every single vacation package, every flight, every hotel stay came with a clear carbon price tag, would you travel differently? Would you pick the train over the plane? Or maybe choose the veggie option instead of the steak? The tools to make that happen are being built right now, and that choice could be ours very, very soon.